everyone, welcome to the Innovia presentation here at DynamicsCon for the Power Platform. Our presentation today is called Get Everything You Knew About Reporting. So that title might have drawn you in. Basically, our goal here today is to realize that many business leaders out there, you may be drowning in different reports with spreadsheets coming at you all the time at a speed that makes it impossible to make sense of it all. But what if reporting was more than just something your team had to get done? They had to sit down, they had to get that report put together, they had to compile all these things from different systems, and instead was something that helped them get things done, provides data that can be useful, that can tell you what needs to adjust in the moment, those kind of things. So what if that was possible? Well, with Power BI, one of the Microsoft products within the Power Platform, it really is a lot more feasible to get to that point. So today we're going to learn how changing the way we understand and interact with reports will prepare you for success with Power BI. So a lot of times we found that when people transition to Power BI, they're bringing a lot of conceptions that come from the way that they've done reporting in the past that simply aren't true in Power BI and maybe actually limiting. So in this session, I'll go through some of the strategies your business can use to adapt to the new paradigm and utilize the data at your fingertips in more impactful ways. My name is Keith Sayre. I'm the Power Platform Team Lead at Innovia Consulting. I lead a team of Power Platform specialists who work with our customers to develop the Power BI, Power Automate, Power Apps solutions that are most useful for their business. As I said, our agenda today, we're gonna kind of break it down into different chunks. We're gonna first talk about how we traditionally report, some of the limitations in that, and some of the things that we're trying to overcome, and then how Power BI transforms the process for us. So we'll be talking about how with Power BI, some of these limitations that we've seen in the past are simply not there, and some of the different ways of interacting with Power BI can help us be more efficient in what we're doing with our reporting data. And then we'll touch on why this is so important for your business and how it's helping you out immediately. So first, let's talk about how we traditionally report. So I think many people are very familiar with this. Excel is one of the big ways that people report data out there. So that's kind of where I'm going to be more or less thinking where you're coming from when I'm talking about this. But let's kind of go through some of the traits of our traditional reporting workflows. So let's think about the standard workflow. So if you're compiling a report that you're going to make in Excel, for a specific purpose, get the data together, you're first going to download that data from wherever it is. So that could be something like Dynamics 365 Business Central. That could be from your web analytics website. That could be from any kind of CRM that you're using. Any kind of thing out there that's collecting data, that's a sort of a transactional system that your business is using, that's where that's coming from. And then traditionally, there wasn't always a good way to make all of that make sense together. So if someone was wanting to see a report that compiled information from multiple places, somebody would have to manually compile that data, and that could be fairly time consuming. Because you would have to match up columns, you'd have to figure out where things connect, and then write a bunch of Excel formulas to make it all come together. And you pretty much have to do that. I mean, you could kind of save your formulas if you're going to do it the exact same way, but that's something you would have to do pretty much every time that you would need to create that report. At least putting the data all together manually would be one of them for sure. And then if you needed to get that data out to different people based on their needs, so for example, if you had sales data and you needed to split it out by the salesperson who that was from or the manager, you would have to split those out, make separate reports, and then get those out to those people. So the single report you have then could be many different output reports, and you'd have to basically run through the same process each time that you wanted to do that report. And then obviously you'd have to send that out to each recipient. often just through email manually. So let's take a closer look at some of the key components of what we would term a traditional report. So you can see here we've got just a simple report. It's just for demonstration purposes. We've got dates, our customers, the document number that we have for this transaction, and then the amount of the transaction on the far right line. Pretty standard stuff. Most businesses would be familiar with some of these kind of metrics. So let's take a closer look. So with a traditional report, as you can see, we've done it in a table. A traditional report is often limited to only tabular data. So we have this kind of report here. I mean, you could do pivot charts and stuff like that with Excel, but still, you'd be kind of limited to this, straight data on the page. If someone wanted to go into the details, they would have to kind of find what they're looking for. So obviously they can do filters on the columns to find things that are interesting to them or anything like that. But all of that has to be done essentially manually. And then you would have to calculate any kind of subtotals on your own as well. Now, if you were doing a pivot chart, it would kind of do that for you. But there are some limitations in that, and maybe that's not how you would want to do it. So let's take a look at a couple more traits. So if you have data from multiple systems, in general, you would have to compile it manually. Usually that's with something like a VLOOKUP function. So you would have the raw data from your other system kind of accessible to your final report. And then you would say, okay, so look up everything where, the transaction equals Bob's muffler, return the document number and the amount for that. Essentially, that's how that would work on a kind of traditional workflow. The other big limitation, and this is one of the big things about Power BI that people kind of have to start rethinking their approach. So a report in the traditional model is really dated, so it has a specific as of date that does not show any more recent information than that. So you can see our chart ends on 1/3. So anything that has occurred after that, we'd have to basically run the report again to get that data. And the file that we save will not be updated unless it's like already tied to a Power BI data set, but we won't get into that. So a traditional report would basically have an expiration date. So it would be all this stuff that you put together that would ultimately not be reusable for the long term. So as we're thinking about this, there's some missing components that we're kind of missing from this whole traditional reporting structure. So the first is at a glance visual summaries. So as I said, if somebody's trying to understand the data that they're seeing, they kind of have to go through it line by line and sort of piece it together, or perhaps run manual filters, run some sums on their own, that kind of thing. It's just some extra work for the report reader. There's nothing that kind of jumps off the page and says, okay, here's the totals for these things. It's also missing some interactive elements, like some flexible filtering and slicing. Essentially, as I said, you can filter by the columns, but there's really some limitations with that when you compare it to something like Power BI. And then obviously it doesn't have kind of the interactive elements. There's a sort of kind of UX UI design that goes into a Power BI report that isn't present in a traditional reporting structure. And then finally, responsive looks based on the user looking at it. And we'll look at that a little bit more when we get to the Power BI section. But basically, as I said, you would have to create multiple reports for different people if they require different subsets of the data. What if they could just open the same report and see only their data? So that's something to consider as we get going into the Power BI section. So as we've seen, the manual reporting process has some limitations that are on the users and kind of create extra manual work. So let's take a look at how Power BI transforms the process. So remember that workflow that we talked through? Here's kind of a new workflow. So the first part of this workflow is to set up a Power BI report. That's done by your designer. It could be done for one person for the entire company. Um, so that's kind of the key benefit, is that they're really limiting who's needing to do a bunch of report design. So the Power BI report is set up. You put it into the service. People can access it there, and then once that's complete and put up there, you can just schedule your refresh cycles according to when you need to see that updated data. And then the cool thing is, with the Power BI service, it will refresh based on the data sources as those data sources change. Then finally, just give access to your users and then let them check on their own schedule. So they're not really waiting on someone to complete a report for them. They can just jump into the report, get the information they need, move on with their day. So that's kind of the real. These are sort of the real big benefits. Now, essentially, steps 1 through 3 of this workflow, whereas before, we talked about the traditional workflow, every step had to be done again each time. But with this new workflow, steps 1 through 3 of this process are essentially one and done. They're done for the report, and it's, unless something changes to the way you want the data laid out, there's really nothing additional that has to be done as far as the design, because it will just refresh the data, and you'd have that report up to date when they come back to it. So that's a really big time saver in that, it's one person, they do it once, it's good to go. So that's sort of the really cool thing. And then step 4, that's the one that repeats. That's the easy one. Let them check it on their schedule, get the data they need, and move on. So very cool stuff with what Power BI can do about reporting and changing the way that we understand it. So here's an example of a Power BI report, and this is an all-up sort of revenue COGS margin type of report. So as you can see, we've got many different boxes on here. We've got visual representation of the data, as we mentioned before. At a glance, you can tell that there's a significant drop between those last 2 months on the bar chart. You can tell that there's a 63% margin right now. You can tell which of the customers are most profitable for you right now, just at a glance. We don't have to parse the data. We don't have to go through all that. Someone's kind of set it up, aggregated it for us in advance. And now our report, we can look at it. We've got the information we need. We can move on. Or perhaps it prompts you to then go into the systems with the source data and find out more information about something specific. So maybe we want to know what's up with that first month in the column. We want to know what those transactions were. So now we know exactly where to look for the more line by line data. So as you can see, this has one report for any date range. As you can see on our report, we have a date slicer that allows the user to set any date range that they want, and then it adjusts all the graphics on the page to show data from that period. And there's a couple ways you can do that. Right there, we've got it as a start to end date selector, but you could do it as periods. For example, you could say like have different months that they can select or different quarters. And then, of course, we mentioned it. The visual representation of data is a huge thing. That's the kind of thing that makes people switch to Power BI, is that the data is visually represented on the screen. It makes it easier to parse and understand. Some of the other things that we've got here are the interactive elements. So as you can see, when we click one of these data points, it filters everything else by it. You can see in this shot here, I have clicked the largest customer group, and now it's highlighting the information that's related to that customer specifically in the chart. You can see if you were paying attention between this and the last one, the all up numbers have shifted as well. So, for example, now we're only seeing revenue from this particular customer. So that's what's really cool about the Power BI report itself as well, is that if they want more detail on something specific, all you got to do is click it and everything else reacts to that. So, but sometimes, data is better represented in a tabular format. So that's something you can do in Power BI as well, but it really takes it to the next level. So as you can see on this particular report, we have multiple tables in the report. The left, we have our different GL accounts, like the chart of accounts, separated out into categories. And then on the right, we have GL account entries. So what's really cool is that these tables now can cross filter. So if you select, for instance, the assets category, now all of the entries on the right table will simply be associated with that account category. We can kind of see how that looks here. So in this case, we've clicked on the assets in the graphical representation actually, and then that has filtered all of our tables. But you can just as easily click the table label as well. So as you can see, we've got all these different filters as well that we can use with this. So we can change the posting date range that we want to look at. We can change the amounts for those different entries. We could change what the type of document is or the posting group. And that's really not all you can do in these. These are just kind of some that we put into this particular report. Basically, any category that goes with your data can be done in this way. So as you can see, we went from a very large set of data down to just 2 entries because we really target it down by exactly what we want to see. So this is really cool because now if you're wanting to examine something specific, you want to see, what did we put out there that's over, $50,000 or something like that. You can do that and get this whole entry. And what's nice is that table that you see with the GL entries, that can also be exported to Excel if needed for additional analysis. And it will take all the filters that you've put into this report to begin with. So you can see how it's kind of changing the way that you understand your data, how you prepare it, how you put things together and interpret it. Power BI can also solve the issue of having regular reporting. So one of the things that you'll run into more than likely is, when you were running manual reports in Excel, you would have to send them out to people, and you would do that on a kind of a cadence. It could be monthly, weekly, whatever it is. So when they got that email, then they would know to go ahead and look at that report and get the information they need. So with Power BI, there's the possibility that you set it up, and maybe some people forget to kind of log in and look at it. Well, here's how you can solve that. There's a very simple feature in Power BI once you get into the service called subscribe to emails. And you can set the rate that you want that to come through. You can have a preview image of that report that came through. And then, you can set up when it wants to occur, who you want it to go to, all those good things. And it gives them a link to go and check it out if they need to take a closer look. So once a user has set this up, they basically can forget it until it comes through. And then that gives them the opportunity to check the report on the cadence that makes sense. Here's how one of those looks like. We can set it up and we get our email that comes through that gives us a preview image as well as the go to the report icon as well. Now, this one is, I think this will be really cool for a lot of people, and this is something that really transforms the way that you prepare reports, and that's row-level security. Row-level security in Power BI lets you set up the report to understand who the user is that's looking at it and filter the report to the data that they need to see. So this is a great way to set up things for individual metrics for your salespeople, and that makes it so you have only one report that both the manager and all the salespeople can use. You don't have to have multiple ones with different filters and things like that. It can be the same report, because what we do is we actually set up the roles to filter the data based on who's looking at it. So we can do that for things like the production manager to see their data only. We can filter a user's assigned location to that one only, so that one report works for all your locations. That's kind of a big one as well if you have multiple locations that have data. And basically, here's how it works. So you can set up a dynamic filter, and you do it within the Power BI report builder. So in this case, I'm setting up a dynamic salesperson filter. So I'm filtering on the salespeople table in this report, and I've selected email as the object for me to do my filtering by. Then all we do is we put in a quick little function. So we say email equals user principal name. So the user principal name is basically when you log into Microsoft, that's the email address that Microsoft sees. So that would be your, mine would be ksair@novia.com. But whatever your organization is, when you log into Power BI, that's what that is. So as long as you have the list of people with their email addresses, you can do a filtering just like this. So you can say filter all data to where email equals user principal name for this role. Then when the person has the role, different people who log in will see the same report, but see different data. So in this case, we've got on the left side, Peter only sees metrics related to his sales. And then on the right, Annette sees only the transactions related to her sales. So this is one report. No one's doing any extra filtering. It just is knowing who's logging in, and it's showing the data as necessary. So this is really powerful for reducing sort of the duplicate effort that goes into manual reporting when you need to create different documents with different sets of data for different people. There's a lot more we could talk about with Dynamics row-level security. We do have that as part of our advanced Power BI workshop materials as well. So if you're ever interested in that, check that out. So how does all this transform your business? This is really kind of the summary of what we've been talking about. So the benefits of switching to Power BI are really, in my view, less time reporting each month and week, because you've set it up and it's pretty much good to go once it's set up. So the longer you go, the more time you've saved for your team. There's also fewer places where report data is stored. If you're emailing reports back and forth, people save it to different locations. There could be multiple versions of the same thing. In the Power BI service, you have the single report. It's there on the service. Everyone accesses the same thing. And then there's the ability for the users to really self-surface their filtering needs to the specific data they're after. That's when I was talking about, hey, we want to really hone in on these specific types of entries that we want information about. That's really one of the big benefits. They don't have to reach out to somebody to try to figure out some kind of additional query. If they've thought about the filter in advance and put it on the report, the user can really get the information they need without really any IT support or anything like that. So that's really powerful for changing the way that we do business, changing the way that we interact with reports, and really make reports not just something that someone has to do to get out there, but as I said, the kind of data that we're looking at is it's up to date. It's data that's impactful. You can make adjustments to what you're doing based on that data. So those are really sort of the big things that I see when you switch to Power BI, how that's going to transform your reporting process, and why, the title of this presentation really came about was transform the way that you understand your reporting for your business. So yeah, and a lot of this is just based on conversations we've had with people about when they're switching to Power BI, some of the concerns they have. But yeah, and I think that if you have this paradigm in mind when you're going down the Power BI route, I think you're going to avoid some of those common misconceptions, common pitfalls, and really get more from your reporting. So yeah, thanks for joining us here at Novia Consulting's sponsorship session on Power BI. We will also be around throughout the event, so feel free to reach out to any of our staff members, and we have a few other presentations as well that you'll definitely want to check out. So thanks again, and we will talk to you soon.
Hey everyone, so happy to have you join us here for our session at DynamicsCon. So yeah, I've just got a few minutes to take a few questions that have come along the way. So the first one that we've got is, can you base a subscription based on the refreshes? And that is something that you can do. There's an option in the menu to have the frequency be after data refresh. So that is definitely something you can do. Um, Stephen asks, is Power BI available yet for on-premises users? So I'm guessing that you're meaning Business Central / Dynamics Nav, and it is usable for that. What you would use is you use OData connections to get your data into Power BI, and then you can build your reports from there. But yeah, it's no problem to do that. And Miguel has asked, where is the Power BI data stored? And this really depends on how you've got your model set up. There's two different ways to do it. There's the import model, where Power BI will bring data into itself and store it in the service. And I believe what it does is in the background, it's storing it somewhere in Azure. But you can also do a direct query model, in which case it will just pull the data from your source whenever there's a refresh of your visuals. So a lot of times you can do that with things like SQL Server and things like that that are enabled for direct query model. So yeah, I hope you've really enjoyed the chance to hear a little bit about Power BI. I think that the topic kind of came up because I was thinking, this really kind of changes the way that people approach reporting in their business. So we're going to try to articulate that and make it so that people can see what the differences will be when they go into Power BI. So thanks so much for watching. Be sure to check out the Innovia booth and some of our other sessions throughout DynamicsCon. And thank you again to the DynamicsCon team for putting on this great event. Thank you.